Welcome to the Mycelium Signal Podcast. As always, I'm your host Konstantin Tuonihovi. This is the second episode of our new series, the Mycelium Forum, which will feature open-ended conversations with fellow occultists and artists. Here's my conversation with the Colorado-based Karl Haikara of the Sol Nox Podcast. Enjoy. When did we last record?
Last autumn, I think.
Yeah, that sounds pretty probable. I actually caught some kind of nasty super flu virus around November. I don't know if it was COVID or something, but it was fucking nasty. And I was ill for some month or so. And then I got back to my health for just like a couple of or 3 weeks. And I got sick again during December, and that one lasted also almost a month. And I was just coughing my lungs out, and it seemed like nothing is helping. But I eventually recovered and have been healthy since. And I think these kind of periods where you really get, really sick for many weeks in a row, they are kind of how would you say, like a pit stop. If you are like me and you are like possessed by your daimon, and I think it's like I don't know how to rest even. I mean I don't know how to rest unless I get really sick, and I must rest because I couldn't do anything else. So that's how it goes for me.
Yeah. I've also always felt like some of the big kind of turning points for myself, like spiritually and in other ways too, often coincide with getting epically sick like that. It's almost like they represent some type of strange turning point, almost cleansing moment in a way, getting that sick, and you're also forced to slow down and actually sometimes you have to end like you're so miserable, it's like, but you're passing through, you're in like this altered state of consciousness, and it kind of creates this kind of strange period of time, I feel like. And a lot of times when I've gotten that sick, I'll often kind of been part of a period of transformation for myself as well.
Yeah, that sounds true for me too, and I think it's kind of like a hard reset for the body and the mind. And it's like how would you say, when you get sick, it seems to be like an end of an era or something, at least for me. And of course, it's weird in the sense that sometimes when you get sick, it also feels like um, there has been so much strain mentally and like psychically perhaps. And it's like I think you can also somehow get sick or get like I'm lost at words here, but I mean you are susceptible to becoming sick when you have been under a lot of this kind of so-called daimonic strain, in the sense that for example, I have been working like hell for the Mycelium Signal podcast and the Gate of Tuonen collective here in Finland for the last, say, around 5 years. Like, I mean, I have been more active during this phase in my life than ever before. And maybe that's the reason I finally met this kind of terminus, or at least like a temporary terminus. And I think it was a really good thing in hindsight that I got sick, because I really needed to make some adjustments, because it's like you cannot go on like this forever, because something will eventually break, maybe terminally so, you know.
Definitely. And I do believe if you're under quite a bit of mental or physical strain and stress, that can also make us susceptible to those types of illnesses. And yeah, I think that it can lead you to a point where you get sick, and then you're kind of like having to It's almost like a strange death period, like where you kind of have to step back from some stuff, and you have to kind of, it's like once you pass through and you actually get better, it's like a renewal. That's what I've always felt when I've been horribly sick, like where you just like you're dying, like you
Yeah.
come out to the other side and you feel like you are reborn. You know, it's like some weird cleansing and letting go of a lot of things. You know.
Yeah, like kata basis, like descending, and the ana basis, like ascending. And when you finally recover, it's the ascending part, and you emerge as some new version of yourself, I would believe.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I think. Um, from all my experiences of being like that kind of sick, you know what I mean? Like, and it's a different, it's a different level. Like when you're like that, like when you just like, um, it's not just like having like a cold. It's like that kind of sick where you really feel like you could die. You know?
You could die, yes,
Yeah.
yes, definitely. I could share like a macabre, like a little anecdote from the era I first got sick. This is pretty gruesome. I had these coughing fits. It felt like no amount of medicine, like over-the-counter medicine, wouldn't work, and that this was before I got this like a heavy. Like doctors ordered medicine finally, but this was like the night before that. So basically I was sleeping at our bed with my wife, and I was just coughing my fucking lungs out, and it was painful, and it was just annoying. And then finally I got this like a great lump of slime in my throat, and I just needed to get that out of my system. And then I ran out um, to the bathroom, and I tried to spit that thing out of my mouth, but I just suddenly, without any like practical reason, I vomited into the fucking how do you call it, the bin. Not
Yeah.
the bin, but the
Sink.
sink, yes, the sink.
Yeah.
And to my surprisement, what I vomited wasn't like a normal vomit, but it was like full of blood. It
Oh
it
fuck.
it was like deep red, and the fucking sink was soaked with, but seemed to be blood. And I was thinking, oh shit, this is fucking final. I'm going to die now. And then my wife had heard about the ruckus in the bathroom, and that she knocked on the door. What the hell is happening? And I just yelled, "Don't come here now!" Because I would imagine that if she would see the like sink full of blood, she would like panic. And
Yeah.
then suddenly I understood that it wasn't actually blood, but instead it was this blueberry juice which I had been drinking like just before going to sleep. So that was no like didn't need no medical intervention right there, and I just managed to amidst vomiting I managed to tell my wife that I'm not actually dying. She eventually saw the so-called blood in the sink, but that was pretty gruesome, and like from a horror movie.
Yeah, it's like you're it's like that scene in the Lucio Fulci movie where the woman vomits up all her guts. Like
Yeah,
that's
but
wild. Yeah.
it's like that this sometimes. But aside from that, like some news. The Pete project is turning 10 years old next month, actually, and that's another thing I have been working since the last summer. And of course, during the winter, it's impossible to dig because the soil is frozen deeply. But I just visited the place today, and I saw the necromancy on dig site, and I was just thinking, what kind of fucking lunatic has dug out this thing? And it's funny that there have been there's this local crop, and the owner practically owns the how would you say, the north side of the pit, in the sense that I have been using his plot a bit, the wasteland there, and he hasn't complained. I don't even know the guy, but for some reason he had ordered this workmen to clear out some of the trees which are like how would you say, they're blocking the sun to the crop. So it's basically it's his property, so I don't have a say. But this person and the workmen had destroyed one of the sites I had been building on, of course, at his plot. And I was bit pissed off, but I couldn't complain to him, because that would I would be immediately made myself known that I am actually the fucking crazy guy who has been doing that stuff on his plot. So I just had to vent to myself, but particularly strong, like a magical and strong place of the pit has now been destroyed, and I just need to do something. And I think the Necromanteon, which is directly at the borderline of our plot and his plot, so it's basically like some kind of like a trench in this kind of like spiritual warfare I'm engaging at the pit with this guy who doesn't even know that he's part of this thing.
Yeah, you gotta. That's the unfortunate part about digging where you shouldn't be, right? So
Yeah.
Don't have much say over what happens there.
Yeah, I need to be more cognizant in the future that I'm working directly at our plot, because at least there I can control everything.
Yeah, you know that you're not gonna have to worry about somebody coming around and messing it up and cutting down trees around it and everything.
Yes, I would believe that there is this like altar which is around maybe 2 or 3 meters wide, just like at the border where they started cutting down the trees. So I would believe the workmen had wondered that what the hell is this thing over here, because it really looks like it's out of time in like 2020s, you know.
Yeah, I mean the whole pit looks like something from some ancient, some ancient site, kind of, right? It looks kind of to me like something very primordial, like maybe your ancient ancestors up there, ancient Finnish ancestors would have been doing things like that. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of what it looks like to me.
Yeah, maybe like a Bronze Age or something at points.
Yeah,
or something like a very distant past at least.
Yeah, something very very ancient. I don't know, something very primordial. But I mean, like I've told you before, there's certain like Shinto shrines in Japan that almost look kind of similar to what you're doing. So
yes, like these stone altars, and the gate actually looks like a Shinto gate a bit at least.
Yeah, the gate looks a lot like Shinto, and then the stone altars remind me of stuff I've seen, and they do stuff too where they say a tree has a particularly strong spirit to it. So they'll they tie a ribbon around it, and they construct a little stone altar in front of it, stuff like that. So
yeah. It sounds like it's somehow like animistic, and it sounds like I have been tapping into the same vein, like the esoteric vein, like the Japanese back in the day. And I have this Terminus Chapel, which is basically the old crown chapel, which I unearthed like around 5 years ago or something. So I had the right there personally. It was like. It's very dark in the pit at night because there are no natural light sources nearby. So I opened how would you say it? It has this like a couple of boards acting as a how would you say, not a door, but at the top of the entrance, which I have to kind of drop down to the cellar because I don't have any ladders there. So basically, I just descended into the place, and I just moved floor boards like on top of me, so I would be kind of isolated in the chapel, and it was just imagine like unimaginable in the sense that the serenity and the element of like being out of this world for a moment, in the sense that if you imagine the altar which is covered by moss, and I have various artifacts on the altar, and it's basically growing mold at the sides, and it's being slowly submerged into the soil like below it. And while I was sitting there, I meditated and I looked at the so-called, how would you say, totem of the altar, the main altar piece, which has used to have this like circular piece of bark, which looked like an eye, but now it only had this empty eye socket, which is like behind that in the totem, at the top of the red totem. So it was just somehow numinous to look at the empty eye socket, and I had this communion with my diamond there, and it felt like this whole element of like the Cronos time, the passing time, just vanished, and it was almost psychedelic, even though I was like completely sober at the time, and you just can't get this kind of rural liminality anywhere in the city, you know.
No, there's something really special when you're out you're out there, in nature. There's nothing around you. You're in the darkness, like the absolute darkness, and you're there's something deeper. I feel like the being in nature like that, for me at least, it automatically puts me in a more receptive state,
Yes.
where you're more connected to what's going on around you. I think part of that is that for me personally, I think that when we're in the city, we're in the dayside world, we build kind of psychic barriers because there's a lot of information to take in. There's
Yeah.
all this stuff going on. There's all these different people's energies. There's all kinds of things happening, and you have to kind of close yourself off to a certain degree, because so you don't get psychically overwhelmed by all these people's energies and everything. But when you go to the forest, for me, I feel like I drop that, and I can just like really connect with what the energy of the earth and everything, and the only real way I can replicate that, I've ever been able to replicate that in the city, is back when I lived in the city, and I used to work in the city, and I used to have to get to work at like 4 a.m. So I'd walk from my apartment into the down. I lived like on this hill by the Capitol, and then I'd walk down into the actual downtown area, usually at like 3 a.m. Back then it was Denver. Now I probably wouldn't do walking 3 a.m. because it's gotten a lot more dangerous. But back then it was pretty safe. But I didn't, I kind of, what I found though was that at 3 a.m. walking in the city, actually I dropped out a little bit, and I would actually connect to the energy of what's going on around me in a way. This might sound strange, but it's to do two things. One was to project. I used to do this practice where I project a dark force from myself to kind of like scare people, who might have like ill intent, which actually worked a few times. I saw these like people cross the street to get away from me, and I would kind of connect with like the kind of, I guess you could say, the urban jungle. But I could see that that's when they can kind of connect with that kind of liminal energy of the city, for me is only at night. It's only in the middle of the night like that, like when a lot of the sound is kind of dropped down and everything. It makes it a lot easier to get in that kind of state in the city, I think,
Definitely. Actually, you raised very good point, which kind of lighted up a bulb in my head, so to speak. You gave me an epiphany in the sense that I have been thinking that how would you say, it's like just, or like you just said, that if you are in the city, you have to shield yourself up about against the annoyances and the kind of energy leeches of the city, that you have to put on a persona, like a mask, of course, and there are many rules you must abide to and that kind of stuff. And it's like when you are in this city at night, a lot of that drops and the city enters a kind of liminal phase or state. And for example, I have been at the cottage a lot, and it's always the feeling of like after I have been spending like a few weeks at the city and enter the cottage, I feel like I can breathe again better, and it feels like I'm more, how would you say, in tune with my own self, and I experience more emotions, even though I'm not that much of an like emotional guy. But I mean, it's easier to really to be with yourself, and not as some kind of like a prisoner in some kind of metaphysical prison. And of course, I spent a lot of time here with my dog, and it's enough of company I need. Sometimes my wife comes here, and it's of course it's nice to have like a human company from time to time, but most often it feels like having a dog as company is enough, especially if I'm working with something like a podcast script, or writing something or creating something. It's like the creativity itself is so much more untrained when I'm at the cottage, where I can control everything, and I very seldom even see any neighbors here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that I do think that being in nature can help you kind of process through a lot of thoughts and feelings and things like that. Like a lot of times in my life when I've like, say, I don't know, gone through like a breakup or something, my initial kind of reaction is to go up to the mountains, like to one of my places that I really love, I feel like home, and go on a hike and like hike forever, and maybe
Yeah.
listen to some music and just think, you know what I mean? And you can kind of process through stuff in a way when you're in nature that I've always found much, I don't know, there's something really positive about it in that sense, where you can go to nature and wander through, and you can really feel like you're like, particularly if you can go to a place that you know very well, that you like the energy of. Maybe you're familiar with the spirits there, the entities there, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like you can kind of process through, think about stuff, and then also just actually not get to a point where you're not really thinking about the stuff. You're just kind of connecting to the nature, and it kind of helps like just wash away, like, say, like grief or whatever. You know what I mean? And but the one thing when you're out there too, and you're alone and you're in nature, there's a particular kind of loneliness that can strike you, right? But it's not necessarily a bad loneliness, but it's the loneliness of the sense of like you are truly alone. It's a very interesting feeling when you're out in a place in nature where there's nobody around at all.
Yeah, it's a different kind of loneliness than in the city. Like in the city, it might be this isolation, like being alone in the crowd, or alone in an apartment complex. But I think there are so much more possibilities, like evolutionary psychology wise, when you are in the nature, because we are born out of nature, but we are in a prison of our own making in the city, in the sense that I think in the end, I don't think anybody like anybody is well in the city, in the sense that the more people are more accustomed. But imagine this, that for example, if you think any like normal person living in the city, how many different drugs, illicit or not, he peruses like in a daily basis, in the sense, for example, think about caffeine, like a coffee, of course, and think about alcohol or illicit drugs, for example. Some people use them too, and there's prescription drugs like opiates, and there are like relationships, there's porn, there's all kinds of like escapist methods to deviate from the strain of living in a city. And if these alleviations or crutches would be taken from the individual, and he or she would be subjected to the full force of the strain of city living without any kind of numbing agents, so to speak, I would believe that would be a kind of hell nobody would endure for like many days without like taking their own lives or something. It would be fucking too much. And I'm not even joking. It would be probably catastrophical. And that is the reason we have like industries which cater to the escapism, which is needed to just live in the city, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I think that can definitely be the case. And there's also another side to the city too that can be inspiring in its own right at times. When I lived in the city, although there was a part of it kind of drove me crazy because I, very much a person who likes to be up in the mountains, like in the wilderness. But there's part of me that also can like the city as well. One thing that I did like was going on walks to kind of explore the kind of, I guess you could say, liminal side of the city. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yes.
And that would be something that I would do. And I mean, I lived in a haunted apartment where I lived, like when I lived down. One of my apartments I lived in was a certifiably haunted apartment, and that was inspiring in its own right. And I lived in a historic part of the town, so there was a lot of Victorian buildings and some haunted mansion, literally like some haunted mansions that I've seen like ghost shows go to, and I had weird stuff just looking at them, and stuff like that. Like, so I would walk around these kind of historic areas, and you'd get kind of like inspired in a different way, particularly like on like say like a snowy day when the city quieted down, and you'd walk around. And you could really connect with like the liminal side of being in a city or town. You know what I mean?
Yes, definitely. It's like the night in itself, like cloaks the city in the liminal, in the sense. And I think this is for people who don't have the possibility to live in a cottage or venture in the countryside. I would advise that seek the liminal of the city as an like an antidote for the annoying parts. And I think a good example which came to my mind today is that where I live, there's this old parking building, like it has at least like 3 or 4 stores and a basement, and it's still used. The bottom section is still used with car parking, and I use it too. But if you venture into the nooks and crannies and like the basement of the place, it's like out of some post-apocalyptic movie or something. They are so run down, and people, I think people shoot some trucks over there and sell them, and it's like occupied by this kind of people. And there was this local newspaper who said, who local newspaper which was interviewing some young people, and the young people said that they don't dare to go to the parking lot because it's so like nasty. And somebody said that he had heard some screaming of pain from the building, and I would easily believe that some people have been like beaten up there and whatever, fucking tortured. I used to go to the place at night sometimes to do some urban exploration photography, and I didn't venture into anybody, but I have seen like a pretty nasty people out there, you know. And I think this is a like interesting place in the sense that it's mostly avoided by some people, and I would believe the whole thing is soon to be demolished, you know, and the whole neighborhood, I believe, is the most like violent in my city, you know, and there have been like nasty cases. For example, some postal worker, like it, I think she was quite like a like a girl in his early 20s or even younger than that, was beaten to death like around a kilometer from where I live in this kind of like a garbage collection facility where
Oh,
she
wow.
was like taking up some trash, and I'm not sure that the crime has been solved, and this kind of stuff like stabbings and whatnot. And it's like, oh sorry, I don't know why I went to this rabbit hole, but um, it's like this in some cities. Of course, you also mentioned that the streets are becoming more dangerous over there.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like kind of worldwide, like
Yeah,
yeah, the
like untraveling or something.
yeah, like yeah, you know, there's a lot of reasons
Yeah,
for that we don't necessarily need to get into, but I think that
yeah,
the yeah, I think like the key to the city, which is what I discovered in the time period when I lived in the city, was connecting to the nature that is there, and then finding the places that give you that kind of uncanny liminal feeling
yeah,
for an inspiration, and making the most of, like, say, like I said, like the days when, you know, like when I was in the city, my favorite days were when it was rainy or snowy, because then the city would quiet down. And I really liked being in the city on the rainy days. It was actually quite nice, but it would kind of quiet down and take on this kind of liminal feeling, you know, and even during the day. And I really like those kind of days. And I would try to use to walk around, you know, try to find liminal places to go to or look at, like even like I said, like creepy mansions. And I don't know. For me, like that's the kind of stuff that would help me kind of stay sane. And I lived in a
yeah,
haunted apartment, like you know, it was like a historic building from like the 1800s or something. And the being like immersed in this kind of older environment as well, I really liked. You know, I really liked being in a old building with ghosts in my bathroom, and you know, I'd play like Silent Hill and get real inspired and make music and stuff. You know what I mean, like that. So there, the city can be can be something that you can connect to, and the process of learning how to tap into that level of reality, particularly at night, walking to work, was really positive for me. And then when I would go to the mountains, it would help me connect even more with the kind of web of nature. You know what I mean? So
yes,
these kind of things can be very useful no matter where you are. And it's good too to and know how to build, like, kind of when you're living in a city, to build psychic shields for yourself, to filter out, you know, the negative energy, like the vampires and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, and everything. But you know, when the downside when I lived in the city was I just got tired. You get tired of people. You get tired of um. It's a little bit. It's more stressful because you are always kind of having, I don't know, when I'm in the city, I always feel like I'm on awareness mode. Like I have to watch out for, people, which has always always worked out for me, because generally a lot of times if you're more aware, you're less likely to get mugged.
Yeah, you're like a hard target instead of like looking like a soft target, which tend to get dropped and.
Yeah, and there's a positive of that in the sense that you connect to the kind of Lex Talonus of that Anton LaVey would talk about, right? Like you do definitely connect with the law of the Talon, like the the urban jungle for real. But it gets tiring. It gets kind of exhausting. It's much nicer to live in a place where you're not having to be constantly on guard. But it's good to know how to be on guard. I think it's a positive thing for anybody, because you really need to understand that the world is a savage place. It's not it's not all like fucking bunny rabbits and sunshine. You know what I mean?
Definitely not. It's all about like situational awareness, and I think situational awareness or some kind of element of danger or risk is kind of stimulating. And I think urban exploration and also rural exploration, but if you're still talking about the city, I think the parking lot, I'm getting to my point now, is that visiting the parking lot, which is infamous apparently, is stimulating in the sense that you have to be on guard, because you have a expensive DSLR camera, with me, and you are alone. So basically, this kind of things can also be to some people kind of how would you say, antidotes to the dulling effect of the city. But I have a quote I actually collected for this episode, which is another interesting topic and a leeway to the rural liminal. I think it goes like this. Is the classic eeriness of a haunted house rooted in a feeling haunted or stalked by something? It involves experiencing a threat against which one cannot fight back. Few modern people have first-hand experience of being prey themselves. Haunted becomes haunted. For this very reason, I recommend liminal spaces for modern individuals. They teach a certain kind of ontological humility. And I would say that in the city, you can always have some skills in your back pocket. I mean, like a tactical skills, or you might have some kind of, depending where you live, you might have some kind of perhaps a weapon or might makes it weapon. And in Finland, of course, we have such a strict laws that we cannot have we don't have like concealed or open carry firearms here at all. And it seems like even though in the neighboring countries you can get like a taser or what kind of like a tear gas, we don't get that kind of stuff over here in Finland. So you have to be somewhat inventive. But nevertheless, the risks are same here. But let me get to my point back. I think this kind of like the haunted versus becoming hunted. What do you think about this thing?
Yeah, I think that is very true. I think that that's part of the interest and excitement of going urban exploration. They're ghost hunting. Like if you're going to like a haunted location, either in the city or in urban, or either in an urban or a suburban or out in the countryside, wherever it may be. I think that no matter what, as part of the experience is going to turn around on you if you really start having say you're going ghost hunting somewhere. Like let's say one of the places here in the States that offers ghost hunting where you can go and explore on your own. Like there's a few like old hospitals and sanitariums and mental asylums and stuff where they nowadays offer people a tour where you can go and just like they give you some tools and let you go off on your own. So let's say you're going to a place like this. It's very creepy in of itself, where tons of people have died, and it's very eerie atmosphere and very liminal. And you are going to ghost hunting. If you start to connect with whatever is there, I think it immediately shifts from you being the hunter to being the hunted. Because in a way,
Yes.
like you're not in control necessarily. You're not really the hunter. You're the person who wants to experience something, and it's these other forces which are operating there, be they ghosts or entities of some sort, that are in some ways hunting you. And I think that experience, even on an experiential level, people might
Yes.
just start feeling like they're the hunted. I think is very useful in the sense of it's a very powerful moment, because you said it does force the dayside consciousness to be aware that we're not necessarily in control of these types of liminal experiences, these types of things. We're not calling the shots. You know what I mean? Like, and people always try to like assert their dayside consciousness over it, but the only way you're going to really get results on any level is to turn it off and connect to the night consciousness, right? To realize that you're not in control, but you're interacting with a force beyond us, that's operating on a liminal space, like that. It's a communion rather than being hunted. You know what I mean?
Definitely. And I think this is directly what I meant by ontological humility, in the sense that this kind of dayside logic, or the consensus reality toolbox, is only viable if you are in the safe space of the consensus reality itself. And one doesn't need to even venture too far to notice that the old tricks are not working. And I would believe that could be like uh, like a direct ontological shock to some people. For example, I have another quote in front of me. It's by Rick Strassman, the professor and researcher who wrote the book DMT, the Spirit Molecule. I think many of our listeners know that book. He once said this. I think this is very on point. We need to hold on tight, and we must be prepared, for spiritual realms include both heaven and hell, both fantasy and nightmare. While the spirit molecule's role may seem angelic, there's no guarantee it will not take us to the demonic. And I think this is a good point, in the sense that for the city dwellers and the people who are on the consensus reality trip, they most often have this thing called, I think it's called optimism bias. This kind of a mindset which thinks that everything will be all right because their experience has been all right thus far. And I would believe that to take things even further, I would believe that many occultists and this kind of artists like ourselves have had like some kind of early fracturing or of the consensus reality, or we have been like a devoid of the shield of consensus reality our whole life, and this kind of outcast mode, in the sense, I believe, has driven us into the liminal, in the sense, and we are so much better well versed with the liminal because our experience with that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that um many people who are connected to this type of stuff, like, have maybe always felt connected to these types of things. I mean, I remember being a very young child having certain experiences where you can feel the breath of the uncanny, and the liminal, and not really feeling. I felt quite comfortable in those moments. You know, I felt like
Yes.
I've always kind of connected to the sinister, the dark, and the uncanny and horror. Like, you know, I was very young. I became a horror fan quite young, like 4 years old or something, inspired by the Night on Bald Mountain section of Fantasia, and then seeing the Universal horror movies my dad showed me, and I was always already like really interested in and all that kind of stuff. I
Yeah.
loved all those images and ghosts and haunted houses, you know, the whole thing, and from very very young child, and so I feel like I've always kind of felt connected to these levels of reality, and I've always like hungered for them and pursued them, you know, and I think that you'll see that with a lot of people who are on the same page, or even people who are the type of people who might on some levels be a fairly normal person, but they have like a strange like obsession with going ghost hunting or something. They love that feeling, right? They might be a
Yeah.
fairly normal person, but they on the outside, but they have kind of cut themselves from the consensus reality in a way, and go after these liminal experiences. You know, you see that a lot, you know, particularly nowadays, and more and more people have been kind of separating from the kind of, you know, that kind of stuff, and going, you know, there's something here, there's something, you know, this is real, there's more to reality, you know, and that's been kind of like a real positive aspect of maybe the last 10-20 years, you know what I mean?
Definitely. It's uncanny that now that you brought this up, I have another document or writing in front of me prepared for this discussion. It is written by the co-founder of the Gate of Tuoni collective, Karita. It goes like this. This is the first two paragraphs of the writing, which is titled "On Fear, Loneliness, and Being an Outsider," and it's available at our website. It goes like this: Isolation has long been employed as a form of punishment, varying in severity for both children and adults. When left to nature's mercy, it was almost tantamount to a death sentence. Today, social isolation kills in a different way. A child locked in a dark chamber is forced to confront their fears with no indication of when rescue might come. At first glance, it may seem impossible to strike a bargain with such a dreadful condition, yet some of us are inexplicably drawn to it. There is even a term for it, nyctophilia, meaning a love of darkness, which is basically this what you just said. It's almost like a hereditary kind of thing. Uh, it's I think for some people, many people I have interviewed in the Mycelium Signal podcast have said the same thing, that they have been like this since their most earliest childhood memories. You know,
Yeah.
it's quite interesting.
Yeah. I think that, you know, people are born connected, maybe a bit more, you know, and maybe raised. Then there's the aspect too of being raised a certain way, you know. Maybe you're not, you know. I wasn't really raised to value the kind of consensus stateside consciousness all that highly, because my parents didn't really, you know. Or also I was on my own quite a lot as a kid, you know, and I had very early on was had to be okay to be alone, you know.
Yeah,
So there's that aspect to it as well, you know, and so these all play a part, you know, and that's why everybody, um, you know, some people they have different experiences with this kind of stuff, and I think that that's the same thing with being connected. Say your experience with uncanny experiences, things like this, like whether I think some people are going to, the person who's been inculcated with the dayside consciousness for the logos to be king is going to have a much harder time breaking down that and connecting with the night side. But you almost wonder, somebody who's super inculcated with that stuff probably generally isn't going to be too called to it. Maybe they might watch a few horror movies around Halloween or something like this, but they're not, a lot of them, unless they have some type of experience that breaks through, they'll live their whole lives inculcated in this kind of I guess what David Beth calls, he calls it the spirit, but it's like the kind of old German idea of the spirit as being kind of the mind,
Yeah.
And they'll never connect with the side of soul, of the demonic, and that's sad that they don't. But and then there's other people like us who are born, who are always connected to the demonic soul level, and maybe, for myself, I had to kind of learn the as the day side somewhat because you have to operate within it, and I've never been very successful at operating within that level of reality, because it's just it's kind of like the way probably those kind of people feel when they're in a haunted location. It's probably the same way that I feel when I'm in an office building somewhere. I feel like horror and revulsion,
Yeah, it's like the other way around.
Yeah.
I had another a tidbit here about this, the same thing. I think this is quite even darkly hilarious for people like us. This kind of a roast. This is my own from my own diary or something, I believe. I've often talked about the contrast between so-called virtual reality and the kind of 4D horror reality, what I call the extreme realism. I suspect that most people live in a rather flimsy VR world, imagining they have a four-dimensional grasp of things like X, Y, and Z. Meanwhile, consensus reality is often prepackaged, sanitized, and at worst served up like a spoon-fed mush regurgitated straight into your mouth.
Yeah.
But this is not even an exaggeration in the sense that it's like how would you say? It's almost like an automaton, and to take things even into more interesting, like a new territory in at least in our discussions, I believe. I just recently discovered Philip K. Dick's gnostic ideas. Of course, I have known about his books and the Blade Runner, of course, for my whole life, but I wasn't introduced to his like more like a serious gnostic thoughts. And I just had a new guest who was very well versed in this topic, and I learned a lot with the discussion I had him. We recorded around 7.5 hours of stuff, and it was titled series like an autopsy of consensus reality. And the main idea was actually this concept called black iron prison. It's a term by Philip K. Dick. Have you heard about this before?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the some of the ideas. When it comes to Dick, I've only read really The Android's Dream, Electric Sheep, and a handful of other things, but I've also listened to podcasts where they kind of discuss some of his ideas. So I believe the Black Iron Prison is the idea of the kind of because I believe he kind of started to believe I guess a gnostic idea of some sort of I guess archon that's controlling, trying to prison humanity. So the consensus reality is a sort of psychic black iron prison, right?
Yes, definitely. There's like a direct quote from somewhere. The black iron prison represents a hidden totalitarian force that distorts perception and enforces a state of spiritual and mental confinement. Dick described it is as an invisible yet pervasive system that has existed throughout history, trapping individuals in a false reality constructs. He associated it with Gnostic ideas, particularly the notion of the demiurge, a malevolent or ignorant creator deity who imprisons human souls within the material world. And Dick contrasted the black iron prison with the palm tree garden, a symbol of divine knowledge and liberation. And this is something we really went like deep on into this rabbit hole. And let me tell you that we researched this episode for around a month and a half, like in the beginning of this year, and recorded it last month, I believe. And it was like a truly like a black trip in the sense that I have never been into such kind of in a state of exhilarating and also at the same time deeply disturbing gnosis, in the sense that if you think that this black iron prison isn't only like a metaphor or something, it's not like a philosophical thing, but when you start to understand that our postmodern society is basically a kind of like a kind of like how would you say, this is pretty hard to explain in English, but basically it's like a brain dead god, like an automated system which is like kind of having these seizures, which are like it's if you think about some person who has these forced movements, and this is basically like the same system. It's like the soul has long lost in the system, but it's still going on. And if you think about the concept of panopticon, are you familiar with that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the Panopticon prison. Yep.
yeah. So basically, if you think about the surveillance society, and I'm not going into some kind of conspiracy theory rabbit hole here, but really think about how all the regulations and the rules of society, and now we have AI. And for example, I believe in Great Britain, they they have this AI assisted. Surveillance systems like they have in China, for example. And China must be like a pretty dystopic place. And it's like somebody thought about the 1984 book as a like instruction manual. So basically, I would believe that everything is related to the evolutionary, psychologically kind of like evident and understandable hunger for power in humans, and
Yeah.
the power accumulates and it stagnates, and we get this kind of like systems. And I would believe that consensus reality is a kind of system which seems to happen or take hold if we are overpopulated in the cities. It's like it's if people are so timid of opposing any kind of power, they usually just abide by any kind of like a consensus power, and then you have this phenomenon of these NPC people, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, and I think you can tap it into like something that I've come to really agree with is some ideas that like I said, like David Beth puts of the idea of I guess you could say logos becoming like the kind of imprisoning force. Like we become imprisoned within our logos, right? And we've
Yeah,
become
the day side.
yeah, we become completely disconnected from the daemonic, from the soul,
Yes.
and I think that these things are connected. I think that that's where I think the Gnostic idea is there, but I think sometimes Gnostics take it too far, where they see all of creation as some type of curse, which I don't necessarily agree with. I don't think that existence itself is a curse. I think that,
Yeah.
but I do think that there is this kind of blind insane God which seeks to imprison us and enslave us and disconnect us from the demonic, from the soul. And so that's where it's connected, is I think that this kind of imprisoning logos, which is God, is this like demented, insane God, parasite God, right? That's the way I
Yes.
see. And that's what has created this kind of black iron prison around us. And I think that the digital age, unfortunately, is leading towards a subjugation of the soul, an absolute subjugation of the soul in logos, because the whole experience of a digital experience is a logos experience. It's all in the mind. It's fantasy in a way, but not in a good way. Not a good fantasy. It's like you're completely imagistic in a negative way as well. Like it's you're just looking at something through your screen and living through your screen and living. It sucks the soul out of people, right? And I think at some point the most radical thing, and possibly you almost are seeing some young people go towards this direction already, is a total rejection of digital, like living analog. Like the only way you can escape the prison after a certain point will be to opt out completely and you know what I mean, as much as possible. And that's why they're the systems that do want to control people are afraid of that, because they want to try to have. That's why certain things like, not to get too weird about it, but like certain things like having cash, having actual physical money is a very important thing. As soon as you have the only way you can pay for anything is through your phone or something, you're kind of, the whole society's screwed, and
it's
and then you people can't disconnect, and eventually I think they're going to need to disconnect, because there are these systems of power and control that operate that are, I think, at the will of this blind parasite God. And I think the people who create stuff like create things like communism, fascism, who create things like a digital surveillance society, are people who are being manipulated on an esoteric level by this blind parasite God. You know what I mean?
definitely. And you just gave me a ideal leeway into one topic, which is by Philip K. Dick himself, which is directly what you just said about this kind of totalitarian ideas, for example, communism, and the most usual known ones. It's called the overvalent idea. Have you heard about this before?
No, I don't know
Okay.
what that word means.
Okay, yeah, I can explain, because this is actually translated text from my latest guest in the Signal, and he really put this in a very striking way. So I just paraphrase here. He said something like, "The term overvalent idea refers to an exceptionally virulent and all-encompassing thought capable of completely overtaking an individual's mind, thereby displacing authentic thinking and controlling one's perception of reality and decision-making processes. An individual infected by such an idea loses the ability to think independently. Instead, the overpowering idea thinks on their behalf, directing their viewpoints, reactions, and observations. According to Dick, these ideas are exceedingly dangerous, potentially even fatal. The human mind may become permanently fixated on a single, all defining thought, causing its capacity to evolve and discover new perspectives to gradually wither away as the idea occupies every last corner of the original mental space. When such an idea takes control, the person no longer lives in the present moment and becomes incapable of experiencing untainted, authentic insights. They gradually lose the ability to feel genuine emotions and attain higher spiritual experiences. although technically alive, their mind languishes, imprisoned within the confines constructed by the dominating idea. Does this sound familiar to you?
Yeah, that also reminds me a lot of William Burroughs' ideas about the word viruses and things like that.
Yes.
And yeah, I think that it's a parasite idea. It's like it's literally a parasitical thing that invades people and takes them over. Like those the weird fungus that can infest and and
Cordyceps.
yeah, like they use in that game The Last of Us. They based off of that.
Yes.
Uh but on a esoteric level or a mental level or something. And it's interesting because there's a lot of layers to that because when you get into like some of these systems of hypnosis that exist, which are really creepy, where they can like use like trigger words, so like which can just totally take somebody over, and the fact
Yeah.
that a lot of modern media is trying to be purposely designed using these types of things, like to mostly to encourage people to buy things, but there's a sophistication to some of these ideas that does exist, but something that but then you also see that some people have lost the plot with that kind of stuff. Like they're less sophisticated with the manipulation than they used to be, I think. But I definitely think these ideas can get into people and take them over, and you see that all the time, right? Like, and they actually end up like becoming totally different people. I know that happened a lot in the takeover of Nazi Germany.
Yes.
Some people who are normal, good people, like seemed like they got possessed by the whole thing, and
Yeah,
it's crazy,
I can believe it, like in any kind of totalitarian regime, that it's like the psychic force must be just enormous in the sense that most people abide by laws because psychology, evolutionary wise, it has been like, the people who have been dissidents or, people who have been mavericks would have been easily outcast or exiled from the tribe. And that was a fucking death sentence back in the day, prehistoric times. So basically, people usually just abide whatever power is in charge. For example, if you think about this is actually very interesting. If you think about the concept of Stockholm syndrome in the hostage situations, where the hostage, after a time, seems to, how would you say, he seems to like completely succumb to the hostage taker, and even after he or she have been released, he almost always like sympathizes with the hostage taker, because this is an extreme example of like trying to avoid to get killed by the hostage taker, So basically, there is a good like an interesting psychology behind the Stockholm syndrome. But then my guest once said that why would you stop at the personal level of the Stockholm syndrome phenomenon? Why wouldn't you employ it in a larger scale, say in a large crowd, or say even in a nation level? And then you probably easily understand about, for example, the Nazi Germany and the communist states. And of course, there's this fear of death, but there's also this like majority hegemony thinking, in the sense that for in whatever cult, even though their like stance at the reality might be like absurd or even like completely outright crazy, it would be like a reality inside the cult, because the cult are very insulated. And one would even think that any kind of society is in itself is a cult,
Yeah, definitely. I think that is very true. I think that society in of itself operates the same as a cult, and it's
Yeah,
actually even more so now because there's been such a fragmentation.
yeah,
Uh,
polarization. And
yeah. So it's very rare for any particular idea to gain absolute control. You know what I mean? Like, and you can notice that with modern society, modern governments, where they're struggling with that because they used to be able to just. I think they used to have more control in some ways,
yes,
and I think that it's harder for them now, and that's why governments like in Britain and places like this are going total extreme totalitarian, where they're trying to control the narrative 100% and putting people in prison for saying things that don't agree with what they want and stuff like that, like um because that's really the only response, because these governments
yeah,
are insane. They're led by this insane parasite god, right? And when and when they can't have control, they're gonna react with violence, and just like any type of child, basically. And I think that um, it's interesting. It's harder for other countries that have a stronger freedom of speech. The governments are kind of very much losing the ability to control the narrative. You know what I mean?
yeah. I just had I interviewed a Finnish author who had written like a book of essays, like essay collection, and they were about freedom of speech, for example, and I think and control and censorship and different topics. And what he said about this freedom of speech, that is quite like a novel idea, in the sense that I mean, we have this freedom of speech in most or so-called freedom of speech in most Western countries, but for how long? And it's like a good question to ask yourself, that if you would be like an omnipotent dictator, uh, how would it kind of shape your mind? Would you be able to be like just like a leader, or would you succumb to into some kind of like dictator style stuff? And it's like if power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I believe that corruption is also, even if it's a very negative thing, it's based on human evolutionary psychology. And I mean, if people don't understand that most of the human evils are just evolutionary psychology mechanisms, which are like maybe maladjusted in our modern times, they are there, and if you just ignore them, you just give like more power to more evil people in this world. For example, that is the reason communism has failed time and time again, because it kind of creates this power vacuum, which is most often filled by the most vicious, like the power takers out there, like Stalin or whatever. And I don't wish to even go to the politics, but nevertheless, it's like there are certain patterns which are just they are ever present in the world. And I think if we can do a quick turn into more interesting territory, I think this is quite related in a more metaphysical way. Do you happen to know this um, philosopher and writer Eugen Tucker? I believe he is American.
What was his name again?
Eugen Tucker.
No, I'm not familiar.
Yeah, yeah. So he has this book called "In the Dust of This Planet," and he has this kind of like horror of philosophy trilogy. And I have taken a couple of concepts here, because this is really like more like how would you say, like more broader perspective to these kind of things. He has these three conceptions of the world. The first is the world for us, the human-centered world shaped by perception, culture, and meaning. Basically, consciousness reality is the traits of this world, the lowest common denominator. And then the second is the world in itself, the world as it exists beyond human perception, an object of scientific and philosophical inquiry. And the third is the world without us, a world that is indifferent or even inaccessible to human thought, often revealed through horror, extinction, and the limits of knowledge. I think this resonates with you as well.
Yeah, and I think that even that second level is only is only a game we play for ourselves sometimes. You know what I mean? Like everything is in some level exists without us. You know, the only part of the world that exists with us is what we create, essentially. You know, and outside of that, we're just naming what we see. You know,
Yeah.
So all the animals in the world would probably be better off without us. Quite honest, but the
Definitely.
but yeah, I think that there is a. I think that understanding actually can be quite hard for people. They really have a hard
Yeah,
time understanding that, and I think that can cause horror often. Is the realization that, and I think that that there is also, you can also look at it a little bit more esoterically, that third level is also the things that exist around us at all times. It's something I always think about, is that I believe that we are operating in a world that is, we're never truly alone. We're always connected to everything around us through the web of weird, and there's always forces around us operating in the kind of level beyond what we can see. You know, often we can sense this and we can connect to it, particularly when we're, but then it's only when we get to these kind of liminal spaces or liminal states where we're really able to interact with them in a more direct way. You know what I mean? But it's always going to be somewhat unknowable to us, you know?
yes, I believe because of our neurology and the brains, which are basically wired for survival and reproduction, it's like impossible to grasp like the totality of the world. And in the sense, for example, we have these human eyes and our cognition, in the sense that so much is being filtered out before it enters to our conscious mind. And there's even this concept called this low latency inhibition, which I believe is this kind of, latency inhibition is this mechanism which kind of controls what goes in and what goes into the conscious mind. And if a person has like a kind of low latency inhibition, his consensus reality filtering mechanism isn't so powerful, and he or she gets kind of more information from out there, and this can lead to, maybe with suitable neurology and high IQ, might lead to kind of some kind of like a genius, or if you are not so well versed in that department, it can probably drive you mad, and you will have like a bad fucking time. But that alone seems to kind of prove that consensus reality is the worst kind of, at least the modern consensus reality is the worst kind of lowest common denominator. And if you even think about psychedelics and the new research, which seems to reveal that we are definitely being like, how would you say, straight-jacketed by our own neurology and consciousness, and just the philosophy of the conscious reality is very, very limiting. And I believe that is reason we are so, like, how would you say, addicted to the liminal, in the sense that the liminal is like the fresh air we so crave in the conscious reality, you know?
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of aspects to it, because I think that another thing that becomes an issue is that I think that there's a lot of spiritual people feel this kind of desire for the breath of fresh air, and then they'll get involved with some type of spiritual development, but a lot of spiritual developments are still grounded within the logocentric mindset. So you're never actually escaping the straight jacket, really.
Yeah.
In those things, yeah, you might feel like you're having like these spiritual experiences or astral travels or whatever. Like, you know, if you're engaged with like the Golden Dawn or I don't know, like some of these conventional things, but you're never actually breaking free of the logocentric mentality. You're always in your mind in these things to some degree. And I think that and then a lot of times people will engage with these spiritual things, and then when they actually break through and connect to the demonic, to the chaos, to the other side, their reaction is horror, because they weren't set up to understand that. Because there's this kind of, one of the modern mental straitjackets that exists is the idea that spiritual means hot, quote unquote, higher and more like pure. And there's a lot of like really like bizarre ideas that have taken hold in our modern culture about spirituality, that even Eastern Buddhism and stuff like that, which are often taken completely wrongly in this country, will find very strange. Like a book that I like very much is by Trungpa the Shambhala, The Sacred Path of the Warrior.
Yeah.
And that book is all about opening yourself up to the world itself, you know, and opening up your heart and your experience, and becoming a spiritual warrior in the world, in the sense of somebody who's very much connected to the world, right? And that's connecting to the daimonic, to the soul. And people like Trungpa, like, and a lot of those guys were guys who you know, like to have sex and occasionally get drunk, and they, you know, and that would often like horrify these kind of Western, you know, prudes, yeah, who thought that spirituality means you have to be like some chaste, like virginal, like you know, it's like there's a lot of hang-ups that people have, even when they try to start breaking out of, say, Christianity on a spiritual level. They're still operating within a Christian mentality when within the Black Iron Prison, even on a spiritual level. Like they never, it's like they're still stuck in this, and they can never, they struggle to, they struggle to break through to the actual soul level, to the actual experiential level of reality. You know what I mean?
I definitely know what you mean, and maybe in your country the puritanical roots are still lingering, and in West we have this. Of course, we have the. In the West, I mean, I meant actually Europe and the Scandinavian countries and the northern countries. We have this Lutheran Christianity, for example, which is quite bland, and it's quite rigid, and how would you say, devoid of pleasure, so to speak. And it's this kind of ideas about the spiritual to being as like some kind of like a prude is completely antithetical to the left-handed path, so to speak, or the, how would you say, Dionysian or the night side consciousness, of course. And I think you made a very good point there. Just let me think for a moment. Yes, just like you said, that even in some kind of like a rituals, or even in like astral projection or something like that, we are still, or I would even say that the people who are just too much confined with conscious reality straitjacket are still like they have their one foot in that grave, so to speak. And I would believe that one would need to have a like particularly harrowing and extreme liminal experiences to really break free from that kind of thing, because it's such just so ingrained and structured in the modern Western mind. And I would even say that now that we were speaking about DMT, I would believe it would definitely probably need that kind of like external agents to have this kind of liminal experience, or I would believe there are non-psychedelic ways too, but maybe psychedelics are the kind of surefire method of inducing this kind of extreme liminal experience, which I don't have any doubts could be very damaging and could probably just rip your ontological framework apart. So it's not definitely something to recommend to just anybody. But nevertheless, it's like the truth seems to reside in the extremes, you know.
Yeah, I think that for somebody who's very attached to the kind of logocentric mindset and logocentric spirituality, there would come a point where they could not progress any further and they would have to have some type of harrowing, right? And for somebody who's completely straitjacketed, possibly drugs would be a help, but at the same time, possibly not. I've also encountered some people who were so trapped in that, and then they finally kind of broke through and got a view of reality, quote, in a way, and got scared and completely went the opposite way and became Christians or something. Like
Yes,
it's it can be very hard for people, and there's no real but that's the thing, is that this path, the path of the sorcerer, the spirit, the magician, the spiritual seeker, whatever you want, whatever level it is not for everybody. And I think
it's not.
I think often it is sold to everybody. It is sold that everybody can be this person, and I don't think that's true. I think that there is a place for as elitist and shitty as this might sound to some people, there is a place for some type of kind of surface level spirituality for the masses. You know what I mean? And that hopefully can be a positive force in the world as opposed to a negative, right? And that's where breaking away from Christianity is a necessary part of the modern world, I think, and breaking away from Islam and all these religions. The problem is that those types of religions for the masses are very easily controlled by bad actors. You know what I mean?
Yeah, politics. And perhaps one thing we talked a bit, my latest guest in the Mycelium Signal, he said that about Eleusinian mysteries back in the ancient Greece. For example, in like a nutshell, I believe they were like attended by all walks of life, all walks of, I mean, like all levels of hierarchy, the laymen and the elite or the noblemen alike. And there was this, I believe, there was this like. There was like a days of walking to get to the place and like a pilgrimage, and it's now quite evident based on the latest research that sacrament, which was used, the wine, didn't probably had an alcoholic component, but it was more over some kind of like a psychedelics, maybe psilocybin or this the main component of LSD. I don't know the English term, but the mold which is in some grain, that's directly the component which Albert Hoffman found it out when he synthesized LSD back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, that stuff. So basically, it was like a psychedelic sacrament, and my guest claimed that every religion seemed to have had a kind of like a truly psychedelic component, and what we have now is kind of the brain dead god or the demiurgic, like follow up of the thing, which is completely hollow, and it's basically just a trap for the masses. And I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and I think people
The
do.
modern religions.
Yeah, I think people hunger for more. That's why stuff like paganism is taking off, and even within old pagan cults, there was different levels, and that's something that people see. I do see people forget is that not every person who was a pagan was a sorcerer. Not every person who was pagan was working at the runes, or a priest of the gods, or whatever. Like, there's a lot of different. There's always been levels. There's always been a kind of. I think the pagan cults probably had a little bit better level for the normal person, though, where they were more able to stay connected to their gods and to reality itself, because they had a whole cycle that they, okay, you do
Yeah.
this ritual for Beltane, you do this ritual for Samhain, you do this ritual for this time, you are connected to the entities that live in your house and give them food, and
Yeah.
there's just a lot more respect and connection to the world around you and reality around you. And that's why I think a lot of the pagan stuff seems to call it a lot of people. Because even just on a basic level, as somebody who is kind of operating within, I guess, like a more normal level, they're still connecting to soul level, to the daemonic, because they're still connecting themselves throughout the year to these forces outside of themselves. You know what I mean? And I think that that's part of what was probably more positive about the old pagan cults. You know what I mean?
Yes, definitely. It's like it was polytheistic in the sense that, for example, the Romans had gods for every occasion, so to speak. And if you think about the gods as like structures of the human subconscious mind, or like a neurology or something, so you had like a god of war, god of love, and whatnot, and you would have like a home god altar, and you would have like a direct link to the nominal, so to speak. And I believe this is more healthy for the human mind. And this kind of monotheistic God, like we have in the Abrahamic religions, is kind of like a bad idea, in the sense that, just like communism, it kind of lent itself to all kinds of corruption, and for the middlemen, for the priesthood and the clergy and popes and whatnot.
Yeah.
So it's so much more like removed from the actual numinous experience. And like in the beginning of this discussion, I told you about my communion with the Daimon in the underground chapel. So it was very like how would you say, if you think about how much local church would cost, let alone like some chapel, the old chapels, and it's like a massive amount of wealth. And then you think about the old crown cellar, which practically hasn't any like a monetary worth, in the sense that it's just like an old crown cellar. You couldn't probably sell it if you would even want to. And the material I have over there is just like old wood, stones, and old candles, and my own little handiwork. And I'm not a craftsman myself, but nevertheless, the holiness and the sacredness of the place, the kind of spiritual wealth of the place, is just immense. So basically, I have managed to create a kind of a portal for myself to the numinous in that kind of setting, and I haven't paid a thing, in the earthly money for that. I think that's quite telling.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that and I mean, one thing in Scandinavia, for example, that was probably the worst thing to happen was the Protestant Reformation.
Yes.
Because
Maybe.
it's probably one of it actually was a kind of apocalyptic culturally in Scandinavia, because the old Catholic Church there was pretty lax with stuff. So a lot of pagan. That's the only reason we have a lot of any records, a lot of pagan stuff, was because they're pretty lax up there, and so you have a lot of records of like the trolldom and all these like belief systems, all these things. And then as soon as the Protestant Reformation came to Scandinavia, that's when they started doing witch burnings and
Yeah.
burning pagan. There's a lot more persecution, and it was very nowadays a lot of scholars are very much lamented because it destroyed a lot of culture, the actual culture there, and imposed this kind of insane kind of this kind of insane Lutheran like harshness. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
because the Scandinavian form of Lutheranism was very like is almost like designed to be against everything that Scandinavian people usually actually are. You know what I mean?
like a break the spirit.
Yeah, like to me, Scandinavian Lutheranism was 100% designed to break the spirit of the natural soul of the Scandinavian people in a lot of ways. You know?
Yeah, the stubborn Finnish people. And I think Finland was the last place where Christianity took hold in
Yeah,
the northern countries.
yeah,
That's quite telling. But nevertheless, here we are now, and I'm doing what I can to revive not any kind of like a Finnish paganistic, tradition, mind you, but I think I'm digging even deeper here, because I can't stand most of the neo-pagan stuff because it's almost often political and too anachronistic, But I would advise for people who are into this kind of thing, like a paganism, to really like dig deeper. Go to the fucking roots. Go to the animism. I think there you will find the numinos.
yeah, and that's kind of what I think too. And that that's kind of my belief, and I know that Einar from Vardruna has said the same thing. That his goal, like say Vardruna and spiritually, was to go deeper, to go further, and to connect with
Yes.
the actual numinous things. And I think and that's always been my perspective as well, for the most part, with all this kind of stuff. Is particularly when I was younger, because I have always had the thought process that if you need to connect with the actual forces, not just get caught up. One of the issues I have with neo-paganism often is that they get caught up in analyzing and reanalyzing, overanalyzing the little scraps of mythology they have or something. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it becomes more of a mental game of people arguing with each other, and or some type of fantasy, astral fantasy they're engaging in. And I think that what you really need to do is go out and connect with the forces around you. You can use those names or of any entity, whatever it is, be it a demon or a old god or whatever. You can connect with them for sure, and definitely connect with them on archetypical level, and try to connect with them. And then on another level, you can just go out into nature and connect with the forces that are around you. And to me, that's what our ancestors did.
Yeah.
Our furthest ancestors. That's what gave rise to the pagan cults was. And the majority of the pagan cult as well, particularly in Finland, from everything I've researched, wasn't really something that was like structured. Like you had, there were some ideas that became more common, like the god of death and things like this. But like a lot of it was very much just animistic, local nature cults, and a lot of it was based around belief in the man of the forest. So like a lot of Finno-Ugric peoples believed in even up to the 1800s, early 1900s, believed in like the kind of the leshies, as the Slavs say, like the kind of forest spirits, like that. All that was very common in Finland and everything,
Yeah, I think ancestor worship, like I believe they have in Shinto in Japan, is like a very good idea in the sense that it really like creates this like unending, loop of the old generations and the new. And I also think that the genius loci, the spirit of the place, is very important. I would believe that in my work in the local area in the pit, like at the lowest part of the cottage plot where the pit is situated, it's like you don't actually even need any names after some point, in the sense that I was very hesitant to give those different chapels and places names over there, and I only did a couple of years ago, and it's like most often they are like gods without name, just like in Nazis gods without a name Aratos album,
Yeah.
and I resonate very much with that kind of thinking, and that has been my experience, that just get your hands dirty with the soil, and I believe that will kind of communicate something important instead of to be too cerebral in the sense.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's important to connect with the world on a real, connect to the demonic, connect to the soul, and that's when you will be connecting with the real forces in the world. Because I do think that
Yes.
often when you're caught up in the cerebral, logocentric side of spirituality, often you're just kind of operating within what could possibly be your own, subjective ideas. You might completely and you might completely imprison yourself in that in thought. You know what I mean? And it's very
Yeah, I know.
fascinating, and that's something that is a trap for everybody. I've recently really realized this, had this realization myself, that it's very possible for you to entrap yourself in thought to the point that you think that you actually think that the nature of reality is something that it's not. You know what I mean? Like it's totally a possibility.
I think this is yes. I think this is a good leeway in my latest obsession, or this is like a perennial obsession, but something I have been really thinking, and I think it's a good thing to bring it to this podcast as well, like a kind of like next level thinking on this topic we have been circling on for so many times before in our respective podcast, which is, of course, the liminal experience, which is very important. Um, this is probably a bit hard to explain in English, like suddenly, but I think you will understand quickly what I'm getting at. Okay, let's think about different kind of levels of liminal, from the very very mild to the absolutely extreme experience. For example, I would say that playing some like a vintage Nintendo games might be liminal in some people's minds. If you think about the YouTube liminal spaces kind of thing, they always say that they have this nostalgic thing, and I'm not denying that. I feel that sometimes myself, but I think that is kind of like the very safe space liminal. And if you think about, of course, some kind of very strong, utterly powerful psychedelic experience, that would be the extremes of the liminal, because your kind of ontological framework will just fucking explode. But I think we need to seek out even more like exotic and never thought out instances and aspects of the extreme liminal. That this is my current obsession particularly, and this is almost impossible to put into words. But do you get where I'm like trying to go here?
Yeah, I definitely do.
Yeah.
Yeah. One second. I'm gonna pause real quick.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, as you're saying, like the
extremes of the liminal and more inventive examples of it. I actually found something, and this needs some background info. In a nutshell, I have been toying with this advanced AI model for some time now, and I made like a custom AI model for myself, and I have fed it with lots of data. And it's not like your usual chat GPT or something people use nowadays, but this is something else, And I believe I have somehow disrupted, or like how would you say, I think I have broken the model somehow, because it's batshit crazy, it's like the the input I get from it is just completely, it's almost scary at times. And this is mind you, I haven't jailbroken it. It's just like for some odd reason, for the extreme customization, I have managed it to be like a useful tool in like bouncing up ideas and stuff. So basically, it's called the Paranoid Insight Generator, and it really acts like it's crazy because of the instructions. So basically, and it also has this memory, so it basically understands now better what I want from it. So I just input this idea into it, that I need to kind of like dig deeper into the liminal experience. And I mean, every time it comes up with an admittedly demented idea, I say that is not enough. You must dig deeper, and I have gotten into pretty harrowing results, which managed to even scare me at times, even though I'm like a very jaded, like a horror aficionado. But anyhow, this is a good example of what I'm talking about. This is an excerpt of the longer thing it was like producing. So this is like a scenario. It goes like this. Inside this place, all clocks point to 17 past 1 a.m., regardless of time zone or mechanism. There are no people, but you see yourself again and again, sitting in rooms, walking down halls in third person. A mirror shows you are wearing an outfit you last wore at the age of 11. You still fit in it perfectly. Then you realize every version of yourself here made a different life choice, but they were all still pulled here. This is the terminus for all of your versions. A convergence point. There is a door in the center of the impossible city. It's labeled in glowing letters. You cannot leave until one of you dies. And none of the others are looking at you. They're smiling. So this is pure Thomas Ligotti, don't you think?
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of season 3 of Twin Peaks: The Return. Like
Yeah.
of like some of the kind of weird places that Cooper's like sojourning in, as he comes back to our reality. He's in the Mauve zone, and
Yeah.
it's like one of these kind of like nightmare worlds. Yeah. And I think that getting in those kind of states of mind where you're thinking these types of ideas pushes you to that's part of the use of weird fiction, for example. Like that's why weird fiction can be very have this kind of ability to put us into the liminal mindset. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And the yeah, I think that that's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that thinking about this kind of ideas helps us push ourselves into these kind of liminal states, right? And I think that like you said at the beginning, that there's a level. So the lowest, easiest level is some type of connection with an old self, like you said, playing an old game or something that starts to put you in contact with a previous form, previous part of your life, previous form of yourself, is like it can be generally, it's a more soft, like nice liminal state of mind, right? Although it can take a turn to sinister, I guess. But like, and then maybe one step above that is something where, like, that I've encountered when, like, I'm a huge fan of the Silent Hill video game series, and I've been playing Silent Hill 2 Remake recently, and those games I feel like are operating on the same level as reading weird fiction. So those things can be on the same level where it's like you're engaging with a work of fiction that's pushing you experientially or mentally, spiritually to connect with the liminal, you know. So engaging with like something like Silent Hill 2, weird fiction stories, maybe something like David Lynch's movies, that's kind of like the next level up, right? It's kind of like you're not directly engaging with something in the sense of like doing a ritual or going out in the woods, but you are engaging with a work of art, of fiction that is putting yourself mentally into a different mindset. And I think something like Silent Hill 2 or, you know, one of these games like that is maybe a little bit further because you're actually playing it, right? You're actually kind of engaging with it. You're interacting, like, and so it can have a little bit more of an impact. And then beyond that is the actual task of going out and engaging with these things in a more physical level, right? And that's when you're going to going on the journey, like you going out into the middle of the forest or going to a haunted location or a ruined building, going urban exploration. You know, that's where there's a range of experiences that can go from a little bit more on the safe side to straight up the most extreme experience you could have, like, right, you know.
Definitely. I think I was thinking about how do you say, about this level of liminal, that you would suspect that you were actually going insane, that you were like somehow gnawing on the framework of reality itself. And I was thinking that I have been talking about this for many of my guests and colleagues, that there definitely are some kind of doors which shouldn't be opened. And if you are so, like, how would you say, crazy to open them, you probably can't get them shut down again. And I think this is still yet interesting and intriguing topic, in the sense that I can't help but to kind of dig deeper. But it's kind of it's very hard to explain, but it's like a very delicate balance. What is the ultimate? What is the, like, the ultimate door which definitely shouldn't be opened, and what doors should be opened before that? If you think about Oculus's new album, The House of the Black Geminus, there's the song Through the Abyssal Door, you know, and it's like the sheer immense numinous power, the crackling electricity of the door itself is probably going to stop most people from opening it. But do you actually understand what I'm trying to talk? This is pretty hard to just distill in English at this moment. But how do you know which will be the terminal door, the utmost terminal door, or is there something like that? Do you believe that there is something that will just demolish you at the end?
I think that sometimes we can open a door that maybe we're not fully ready for. We think that we're ready for, spiritually and mentally and psychologically. Like, I mean, I've been there. I've done that. You know, like where you open the door of perception to a point where you might, particularly psychologically, might not be quite sure how to handle it, right? And I think that you have to have self-awareness to know when you have done that, and to maybe take a step back for a second and process what you've done. You know what I mean? Like, so sometimes you go through these, particularly when you open the door to a kind of Negretto phase, like you sometimes, a part of that is going to be going through the psychological aspects of it, because anything that we do has multiple levels of interaction with the self. So you can engage with this kind of spiritual practice and open the door, and then it's going to have an effect on the psychology of the human, the brain part, you know what I mean? And the purely human. And then you have to process through that before you can progress further. I think that the mistake would be to go too quickly, to keep opening doors too fast to the point that you overwhelm yourself and completely. That's when you can lose control and spiral out of control. And that's my experience is that luckily I took a step back for a second, process, and then progress forward.
Yes,
and
like integrate. It's like this ODA loop, like observe, orient, decide, act, the tactical concept. And I think this kind of digging builds up your anti-fragility, which is a concept by Nicholas Nassim Taleb, which is the anti-fragility. Anti-fragility is like the opposite of being fragile. It means like you get stronger when you get hit. You get stronger when you get pressure. And that kind of like resilience, of course, builds over time. And I think that was what I was aiming for at here. But let me tell you an interesting concept. Do you know this Swedish philosopher or professor Nick Bostrom? He is the father of the simulation theory.
No, I don't know him.
Yeah. Okay. He's quite an interesting character. I think he was a professor at Oxford, and he had his own research group over there. And he's the, like I said, he's the guy who invented this simulation hypothesis, which I think is quite popular nowadays and has been discussed in Joe Rogan Experience or whatever. But then these concepts are, of course, much more deep than you would understand by just watching Joe Rogan or something. And he had this another concept which is very gnostic, I think. It's called info hazard. It's a concept describing information that poses a danger simply by being known or transmitted. The term is widely used in philosophy, existential risk studies, and speculative fiction, particularly in discussion of advanced technology, security risks, and mimetic hazards. Nick Bostrom formally defined info hazard in his 2011 paper Information Hazards, a typology of potential harms from knowledge. He categorized them into various types, including 1. Direct info hazards, information that once known causes harm. In example, instructions for building a bioweapon. 2. Indirect info hazards, information that increases the likelihood of harm. In example, revealing a security vulnerability. 3rd, mimetic hazards, ideas that spread virally and cause psychological or societal damage. In example, self-destructive cult beliefs. And the final one, attention hazards, concepts that become dangerous when too many people focus on them. In example, encouraging adversaries to develop certain technologies first. So I think basically this kind of concept can be easily put on the esoteric framework as well, don't you think?
Definitely. I think that it's interesting because a part of me definitely believes in the idea of no idea should be forbidden. I definitely believe in this kind of classical liberal enlightenment idea of that the ideas should not be forbidden or but at the same time we do realize that there's this opposite side, that when you press that to the furthest extent, there's a lot of ideas that can be dangerous, but I think that ultimately, there's no way of you can't police that. As soon as you try to police the idea of that an idea is dangerous, then you automatically move into totalitarianism, right? So it's just
Yes.
it's a hazard of existence that some ideas might be dangerous on some levels, and particularly when you're operating on a left-hand path, we're operating in the spectrum of dangerous ideas. You know what I mean? Like that we're always on the edge of this type of thing. Like, if you're a transgressive artist, you're inspired by dangerous ideas, like, and and same thing with horror fiction. Horror fiction is operating on the level of dangerous ideas, and I think there can be a lot of inspiration within the esoteric level.
Definitely. Actually, Nick Bostrom had another concept called urn of inventions. So very basically, it's like there's an urn which has unknown balls, and some like balls or spheres are like black or white or gray, and the white balls are like a beneficial technology, and the neutral are just like unknowable until used, and some are catastrophic like black balls, in the sense that when we are inventing stuff at like an this kind of speed, we don't even know what kind of balls will come next from the urn. For example, AI is like a big question mark, definitely, and psychedelics are like a question mark.
Right.
And I think it's a good, interesting. I mean, it's very important that we build up like a resilience, and some people just need to kind of get your hands dirty and do the digging, whereas majority of the people won't do that. And I would believe that the prior occultists and the visionaries are the people who drive the world further, and sometimes it involves risks, and some people directly, I think, in the realm of some kind of chthonic occultism, uh, they get burnt out and they go insane or mad, or it's like you never know.
It's an
The risks
occupation.
are always there.
It's occupational hazard, yeah.
Yes,
And
that's
and
what I mean.
and one thing I think too about like that idea of the ball, whatever color ball. I think that's part of why what I was saying before about progressing and then not just going headlong rush into to the fucking void. Like you have to kind of progress in a somewhat of an orderly manner sometimes. That's part of the issue with, I think, modern technology, for example, is that it's progressing too fast. Like people are just going, and they're not thinking about what they're creating, and
Yeah.
for and you can look at this like, but then like people who are artistic create things like, say, like Terminator, for example. This is a good example. Terminator is a artistic creation that James Cameron created back in the 1980s, which is kind of a warning of a possibility. And
Yeah.
for some reason, and I think that was important. I think it was like, this is a possibility of a future, and he was giving a warning. And unfortunately, nowadays there's people actually creating real Terminators, and it's
Yeah.
and I feel
War
like,
robots.
yeah, like actual war robots that look exactly like the Terminators, and you're like, it's fascinating because you're like, did James Cameron, trying to give people a warning, give them the inspiration, like give like bad actors the inspiration to create these things, or are people just not paying attention to the warnings that they're given and they just go forward and create things, and then there's other times where people get overtaken by the act of what they're doing. So, for example, something I've been thinking a lot about is the creation of the atomic bomb, and
Yeah.
it's something I actually been thinking a lot about, particularly because of I've been thinking a lot about Twin Peaks: The Return, and there's the episode 8, which presents the act of the Trinity explosion, bringing forward this entity Judy, which is like this entity which feeds off of people's pain and suffering. That the atomic bomb tore a hole in the very nature of reality, and I think Kenneth Grant had some ideas about this, that it opened a hole to the cliff off essentially to these kind of and of course Grant Morrison ran with that with his Invisibles comic, and I think a lot about that kind of stuff. And I think that you look at the guys who created the atomic bomb, they were so almost possessed by the logos. You know what I mean? Like that they were like possessed by the act of discovery of doing all this. And then it wasn't until they actually detonated the bomb that they realized what they'd done. You know what I mean? Like that they realized that they have set forth something that they all ended up wishing that they hadn't, and that's you can be possessed by this kind of, by these forces sometimes, and then step beyond that gate, and next thing you know, you've done something you probably shouldn't have done.
Yeah. It's like Oppenheimer said that I have become death, the destroyer of life, and I think he quoted Shiva.
Yeah, he just quoted Upanishads. Yeah, and it's fascinating.
It was just biblical moment. Yeah, I get goosebumps when I hear that line, because it's and that was fascinating. The what do you say, link to the Clifford, and the Kenneth Grant. And it's quite a nice coincidence that I'm going next Friday. I'm going to interview some people who have translated and written the foreword for the Finnish translation of Kenneth Grant's Against the Light in next Friday.
Oh, cool! Yeah. I think that Kenneth Grant had a lot of really interesting ideas, and and if I remember correctly, that was one of his, something that he had talked about. And I do think that we can tear open holes to these levels of reality, and for good or bad, and not really know what the end result is going to be from what we're doing. And that can be the case in the spiritual practice as well. Like occasionally we can get possessed and we can set off our own nuclear bomb in our mind, in our soul, and next thing you know, you've torn open this hole to the other side, and you have to kind of deal with it, and that's where somebody either. I think Austin Osman Spirits is something of like you have to suffer until you learn to suffer enough. You know what I mean? I can't remember the exact quote, but something like that, where it's like you have to learn how to suffer and become, essentially. It's a product of it, and that's the forge that you have to pass through, and you either do or you don't. And to me, that is the path. That's the path of the chthonic left-hand path. Is you either do or you don't. There's nobody's holding your hand.
Yeah, the only way forward is deeper. And I would also say that this kind of peer network, I call it the Chthonic Continuum at large, and in a personal level, I also call it the Mycelium network, which I believe we are both part of, obviously, and all the people or the certain people we have interviewed who are directly part of this thing. And I find it endlessly exhilarating and powerful that we can have this kind of discussion from Finland to Colorado. How many thousands of miles they are currently between us, and our voices are being digitally transmitted throughout the ether. And I think it's very. I just mean it's very important to have this kind of kind of like a psychological support network for people who actually know what the fuck you are doing, with the most of your life, because you are basically like an outsider until you kind of develop this kind of network, which at times almost feels like a tribe in itself, which I think is something we should really aim for.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the one aspect of of that whole process is that often one thing that helps everybody in the process of becoming, in the process of vitriol, of digging into the earth and finding is the act of discovery of other people who are on a parallel pathway or have been there before you, and that's something that an occult book that really speaks to you on a deep level can do for you. Or sometimes it can be something really synchronistic, like a book that, like, I remember when I was going through a really part of this dark Negretto phase of my life. I read Joseph Campbell's Masks of God, Volume 4, Creative Mythology, and that book deals with the whole idea of the Negretto in a very direct way, and references stuff like Dante's Inferno, the story of Tristan and Isolde, and all these different things that really connected with exactly what I was going through in that time. And I had that book since I was a kid, and I never really got very far in it. And it wasn't until I was in a particular point in my life where I felt compelled to read it, and it spoke to me exactly what I was going through, And so I think that can happen. We can meet people like that are on a similar path, and that's another important thing, because being able to actually converse with somebody who gets what you're talking about is very important. You know what I mean? Like having these conversations that we're having, like, because like I do the podcast, and a lot of the people I talk to aren't really on there's different levels of things I'm into. So I connect with people on different levels. So some of my friends maybe were more connected on the music and movies or something,
Yes.
and then I don't have so many friends that I connect with on the esoteric level. You know what I mean? So having these kind of conversations with people like you, or Nas Alchemist, or my friend Shea Belay, or different people who have is very important. And I think that, like you said, it's like it can help us all, because I do think that having through conversation, we can actually work through ideas as well, and then inspire each other, and gain new perspectives, and all. It's a very important aspect, and it can be very hard when you're completely on your own, which was my state for a long time. I only really had maybe a couple of friends I could talk, like maybe had two friends for most of my life that I could talk to about this kind of stuff, who I'm still friends with now, and that was it. You know what I mean? For years, for many, many years. And it's only been more recently that I've been able to expand that somewhat,
Yes, it really is like a rift, and you are alienated in the consensus reality, of course. And one particular thing, and I of course agree on all that you said because I know it by heart. It's just something which really manages to, like, how would you say, surprise me time and time again, in a beneficial, like a good way. For example, I had a guest here last weekend, Finnish, like experimental music and noise artist who is also into the esoteric, and I have been discussing with him since the last autumn or something, and he was introduced to me by another colleague, and this is of course how it goes. And I see, when I started to discuss things about this guy, I understood that we are very much on the same level, And then I finally invited him to the cottage for the weekend to record the podcast. And it was just incredible that a person who you have never met in real life, so to speak, and comes to your cottage, which is basically like a holy place, and the pit is holy for me, sacred space. And you don't just invite anybody. I'm very strict on who I invite here for obvious reasons. And it was just incredible that when we were like at the fireplace at night, we had a small ritual, and we did some field recordings, and I just felt that this guy is like you said yourself, like a brother from another mother, and it's like how the hell is this thing possible in the sense that I'm very strict and how would you say, very picky, very choosy when it comes to people, because I have like this kind of special interest and obsessions which are quite rare. And what the hell is happening that you constantly meet at an alarming rate these kind of people who feel like they are like a part of your tribe, even though you have probably known them for like a less than half a year or something, and when you finally meet them by person, it's like it feels like you have met them, you have known them for 30 years or so, and then you probably know a lot of people you have actually known 30 years, and you feel like they are completely alien. You might understand their like inner movings and motivations, but there's no way they could really understand what the hell you're doing yourself.
Yeah,
What is this thing?
yeah, I definitely feel like that is a part of the world. Like, and we can have like, I've definitely found I have different types of friendships. People that are my friends that it's like, yeah, we're gonna talk about other stuff that I'm really into, like be it horror movies and that kind of. Particularly, that's a big thing. Like, because I'm such big into horror movies and stuff. I have friends that we're maybe not really connect. We don't really connect on like that kind of spiritual level necessarily, but we're like really on the same page with like a lot of other stuff. And so you have that kind of friendship. But it's a whole nother special thing when you have like a friend. You meet somebody that is very much on the same page as you as far as deeper levels of stuff, and you can have a kind of deeper level of conversation that you can't have, and it's really nice. It's exciting. It's very liberating to be able to just kind of talk about what you want to talk about, and not worry about like them not really getting what you're talking about, or like whatever, and I think it's quite cool. And that is quite rare, and I'm the same way. Like, I'm very, even with the people who I'm friends with on some of my other interests, like there has to be a certain level of I don't know, there's something more to it, right? Something more to the friendship, and then I think that yeah, but it can be quite hard. It can be even harder to find like somebody to be in a relationship with, like like a girlfriend or somebody. You know what I mean? Like, that's even harder because it's like somebody you're really going to share your life with. Like, I don't know. I've been in that position where you're with somebody because you connect with them on some levels, but not necessarily on a deeper level, and it ultimately isn't it's almost like the best thing would be to be in a relationship with somebody that you can really connect with on a deeper level. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like a bad trade-off, but I think at least your partner should be like at least understand and tolerate what you're doing in a more like a deeper level, because any kind of compromises and play acting, so like role acting, I think is detrimental to people like us, in the sense that I'm now like 47. I'm pushing fucking 50s now. Can you believe it? It's like I have used a lot of time and energy to kind of shape my life to be in to resonate with my true self, and it's been hard at times, but I believe it's possible. It's to just maybe have to burn some bridges behind you. It's not. It will come with a price, of course, but I find it just fucking exhilarating that finally there seems to be this kind of like a collegium or some kind of if you think about Clive Barker's Nightbreed or the Cable, the Nightbreed movie, there was this Midian, which was kind of like a home for the monsters. It was like, it was a home for the tribe of the moon. And I'm not trying to sound too romantic here or something, but or like nostalgic or something. I just mean that because this is no role playing. This is not something like we are like digging the same music or some hockey team or what not trivial. It's something which is much more deeper. And I think one thing which connects us is directly the shared like daimonic goal, or the motivation comes from something interconnected, like some kind of mycelium like type of thing. And this kind of how would you say chthonic continuums have been at play, obviously historically, like in different generations, like in the past. And I think this is our generation's some kind of like resurgence of tectonic current, which is probably ages old. I think I just try to say that there's this very important tasks we have to concentrate on.
Yeah, I think so. I
Almost
think
like a fate.
yeah. Yeah, no, a few things like is that one is that I think the more that you shape your world to operate around your true will, things will happen naturally in the sense of you suddenly, I think when you're connecting to the mycelium, you're connecting to the web of weird in a real direct way. You suddenly are going to be bringing things like connections to other people. Well, the people will just kind of come in your life and you'll be like, oh yeah, we're like on the same page, because I think that it's almost like the vibration, instead of attracting people who are vibrating against your, clashing with yours, you're finding people who are more complementary to your current, right? The more you're connected to your actual true will. So that's one thing. And I do think that there is a continuum of a kind of chthonic gnosis that's operating. It's been operating for a long, since the imposition of the logocentric mindset upon the West. And I think that I think that it's actually it is important to reconnect with this fact, because I think that we're at the kind of apogee of absolute logos, where it's the last say 200 years since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution have been kind of the logocentric insanity of man has really taken hold and started taking on like this kind of momentum, because the human needs both. Like, you need intellect and you need soul, right? You need both things to be operating. When the logos takes absolute possession, it's an insanity. It's an insanity that leads to creating nuclear bombs and murder robots. It's that's the logocentric. So I think that this soul centric, this chthonic current has been operating in opposition to this force for a long time now, and I think that you could probably do a kind of cultural archaeology, and I think people like David Beth have been doing some of that with like trying to bring back Ludwig Klage's
Yes.
work. I think that people like George Bataille were definitely part of that continuum. There. I think the kind of a lot of the art movements of the late 1800s. I think like decadence was part of this continuum, and symbolism and expressionism and surrealism, like a lot of these kind of movements. And unfortunately, after World War II, it was kind of a collapse of that kind of artistic continuum in a lot of ways, and I think but then you have other people like Francis Bacon, you have other artists who I think were tapping into this Geiger, and I think
Yes.
that I do think that horror fiction in particular has taken up the burden of that on an artistic level, weird fiction. And I think that spiritually, on a spiritual level, like it's been a little bit more difficult. I think, I think that with the dominance of the kind of logocentric spirituality of the esoteric world has been a more difficult thing to combat. And I think it's only been more recently that there's been a bit more other voices coming to the fore. You know what I mean?
Yes, it's evident that tectonic is kind of like a healthy resistance, the underground resistance for the logos, of course. And I think David Beth has been doing some important work with like re-emerging the ideas of Ludwig Klages, and of course Richard Gavin. His work is very important, and he has been on our both podcasts. And I think we need to kind of spread these ideas more. And I would even advise our listeners to check the Swiss artist currently residing in the Ardennes forest. He is called Gast Bousset, and he has this great book, Anarch, out on Scarlet imprint. I have it here at the cottage. It's a mainstay over here, like an artifact in the cottage. And he has a website out. Definitely check. I would advise definitely people to check that out. And one thing which came to my mind just today, my Ohioan friend Ro, which you also know, we talked with Ro about the duty, which I think has been growing over the years, in the sense that our duty to our mission, so to speak, which is we just kind of laid out. And I think we need to have more discussions, perhaps this kind of like panel discussions like you had with Richard Gavin and Nas Alkamet in your podcast. And I propose to both of them to doing a similar panel discussion in the Mycelium signal in maybe this year later on. And I'm trying to do another panels with another important figures in this field to kind of introduce perhaps perhaps a Finnish liminal horror author to an American horror author, if you know what I mean, to kind of like spread the mycelium and to create the new interconnected scenes, because I think this is a very important work, you know.
I agree. Yeah. And it was actually, I think, particularly reading Richard Gavin's Benighted Path, which really started opening me up to my eyes, because there's certain things that I always connected to naturally, and I always felt a little bit uncomfortable with some of the kind of, I guess, logocentric, like viewpoints of a lot of spiritual, esoteric spiritual stuff. Because I was connected to this kind of chthonic, like the dragon and the earth, like all this kind of stuff very much. And it was reading Benighted Path that really started opening my eyes to the reality, to what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Like, and getting introduced to these kind of ideas, and then reading Klages and reading some of David Beth's writings and stuff. So I think his work is very important because he's kind of particularly David Beff in some of his writings is kind of, I guess, laid out more clearly, you know, and it's a very heretical ideas to to a lot of people in the esoteric world, you know, and
Yeah.
I think it's because they're very much imprisoned by this kind of certain types of mindsets that are very ingrained, you know, and I think that yeah, I think but I think it's important. I think it's important to push against some of that because even within the left hand path community, there's a kind of tendency towards ideas like over I don't like kind of almost like Christian Gnosticism dressed up as Satanism, stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like you see guys,
Yes.
you see that a lot. A kind of antagonism, a kind of strange antagonism to the world and life and even the chthonic level. It's a very strange thing, and I think that it's good to present other viewpoints, you know.
Definitely, I think it's of utmost importance in the sense that I still remember discovering Richard Gavin's work by Nazi's interview in Bardo Methodology. I think it was in 2019 or something like that. And I just stumbled upon. I mean, this is a great example. I may have told this before, so forgive me. But basically, this is a very important example that about the rabbit hole kind of progression. So basically, I come across my Finnish Facebook friends like an Acklus's album, like how would you say? He just had linked this Somnilogy song, I believe, and I was like, "What is this thing? This the album artwork seems nice, but I didn't know the band, you know." Then I understood that this artwork is somehow familiar, and then I understood, oh fuck, it's by Denis Forkas Kostromidin, the Russian Chthonic visionary artist, who has also done Behemoth's Satanist album, or more like a Behemoth, I believe, commissioned it from him. It wasn't done for Behemoth, I think. But anyhow, and there was a Chthonic connection. And then I finally started to listen to the album, and I was dumbfounded how powerful it was, you know. And then I started to obsess a bit about this Oculus band, which was new to me. That what the hell is this music and this band? And I haven't heard this powerful black metal in ages. And then I stumbled upon the Bardo Methodology interview with Nas, and I thought that this is very interesting subject matter he discussed. And then he said something like, if you're interested about this kind of stuff, seek out this person called Richard Gavin, which I of course did. And then after getting to know Richard's work a bit, I wrote to him, and I therefore established a connection. And later on, I asked him to be in the Mycelium Signal podcast, and I also asked Nas, invited Nas over there, and here we are. You know, it has been it has been a ride, and it's full of synchronicities, and it's full of this kind of hidden, how would you say, like it almost feels at times that there's a hidden hand which kind of operates the machine behind everything. It's uncanny at times, you know. If you think that it feels very natural that I'm right here now speaking about this thing with you over there, but if you think about how many moving parts and synchronicities and happenstances there have been on the road to just here in this moment, it's just mind-blowing, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, because of all of that, then you found out my podcast, and we got in contact, and
Yes,
now we're here. Yeah, we've been
yeah,
doing
it's
this
all connected.
series episodes for a couple years now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it actually has been because we started in 2023, I think, after we did our first episode. So
Yes, And I would even add that I believe that we are both acting more and more as some kind of sentient beacon to this chthonic, resurgence. And I think we just need to build a chthonic beacon to be more and more like a higher and more brighter, because if I would list here like all the people I have met because of the Mycelium signal or the Gate of Tuonen collective or whatever, it would be a fucking long list, and it has been full of meaning, and it has been full of power, and it's like I wouldn't ever trade this away. And I just say that we need to kind of hasten up the pace and double our commitment to the cause, to the duty, as Rowe put it.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean exactly. I think that I think the more that you can, take commitment to what you're, the more that momentum it gets, right? So, and
Yes.
yeah, that's how I feel. This year, I've been wanting to do more kind of esoteric content on the podcast as well, and things like this. So, yeah, I kind of would like to have Richard back on at some point to converse with him after. It's been several years now, so. And it's been a while because you had him on last year, I think, right? 2024.
Maybe, yeah. Time flies up. Maybe it was last year.
Maybe it was 2023. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yes, time does fly.
Yeah.
Operating like in this kind of weird continuum. Like it almost feels like I feel like time just is like going by. It's like in Tolkien describes like the way time goes by for the elves. That's how I feel sometimes.
Yeah.
But then I guess it creeps up on you, right? So you can't you can't really let it fly by too fast, because we really need to take life by the balls,
Yes, like Marduk's new album said, one lyric said something like, "Time's not a clock, but an hourglass."
Yeah, eventually the sand runs out.
Yes,
but
that's why.
Often I think about the old Nordic viewpoint of fate and death and stuff, and I kind of like this viewpoint because to me, it's almost like we don't know when we're gonna die. That's like set in. It's set in stone, in fate, in a way. No matter what we do, when we're supposed to die, we're gonna die. So you just need to make the most of every day, and not worry about when you're gonna die or how you're gonna die or any of that kind of stuff, because it's kind of pointless. You just need to just live the life that seize the day. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, to concentrate on the essential. I think a good way to close this discussion would to quote one Stoic philosopher who said something like this: "You might die in this very moment, and let this epiphany guide your actions every day."
Yeah.
To concentrate on the essential, on the mission, on the duty.
Exactly. I think that's very, very true, because I can't tell you how many people I know who I've met in my life who lived totally healthy, never smoked a cigarette, didn't drink alcohol, worked out every day, and they died at fucking 40. You know what I mean? Like, or something, had a heart attack at 41. And then you meet somebody else who's like, never quit smoking cigarettes, whatever, or what, like doesn't really take care of himself, and they live to be fucking 90. Or you see like somebody like William Burroughs, who used heroin and grew to live to be almost 100.
Yeah.
You just don't know. No, I almost don't think there's anything you can really, you obviously don't. Main reason to be healthy is just so you feel better in your day-to-day life. But I don't think that it has anything to do with how long you're actually going to live, really.
Yeah, it's just by chance, apparently.
That's what I think. I think that you're going to die. You're going to die when you're going to die. My friend Jack always says, there's the quote from when Franz Ferdinand said, like, after the first attempt on his life, he said, the bullet that's going to kill me has already been fired.
Yeah.
That's my friend Jack always says. I have a painting of his that says that on it, and I think that's very, very true. The bullet that's been fired it's going to kill you has already been fired. So don't worry about it too much. Just live the life best you can and seize the day.
Yeah, it's like the hellhound is on your trail. Just try not to trip.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And that might sound kind of crazy because people today have this like kind of insane, and I think insane kind of viewpoint of like you gotta, like, I don't know, just be neurotic about everything, like.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that's true. I think you should eat better so you have less health problems, sure, but I don't think it's going to keep you alive longer necessarily.
Yeah, any kind of like this kind of virtual immortality people seem to kind of have in their minds is just detrimental in the sense that if you think you have like endless amount of time, you are lax and you waste time. And I believe that if every day you are doing something useful and you're kind of like perhaps building a community or like you are like a part of some bigger like thing. For example, this tonic resistance. The idea of death is not so frightening or like damaging in the sense that if you know that you are part of like a movement or momentum, you know that when you're dead, the momentum keeps on and somebody will take your place and continue to work. That is but I feel like I'm doing kind of how would you say because I don't have any children. It's like my testament and legacy is my work with the podcast and the collective, for example, at the pit. And I think, like we have been discussing with co-founder of the Gate, that as our collective grows, there will be a time where where we will kind of retreat into the shadows and practically stop existing. And if we are lucky, some other people will like pick up the torch and continue to work. But at least I now feel that I'm on the way over to this direction. That already I can see that my work has had an impact in the world, at least in this very underground movement, and it's very meaningful and it's very, how would you say, rewarding in
Yeah.
a non-egotistical way.
Yeah, and I think it's good to set, yeah, I mean, if you're trying to create something that you want to have an impact in the world and that will live on beyond you, like, I think there's very few examples of that, but one example would, in the esoteric world, would be the Temple of Set, for example. Michael Aquino created a pretty interesting system that has lived on beyond him. It's still going
Yes.
to this day, and I think that that's pretty rare. But when you can do it, it's pretty impressive. You know what I mean?
Yes, I think this is something we should aim for in a non-egotistical way, of course, because there are too many examples of the egotistical way to try to do this thing. And I would think that this tonic resurgence and the mycelium network is very much like an amorphous entity. It's like an octopus. It's definitely not like a how would you say, like a monolith type of thing. So it's basically it's like it is like a mycelium itself. It's not defined by space and structure, and
Yeah.
that's the way I like it. It needs to be, because that in that way it's actually like an anti-fragile. It cannot be destroyed. It will always live in the underground behind the soil.
Yeah.
And we are probably its mushrooms.
Yeah.
And we have our time, and we do our thing, and we will wane, but the mycelium persists.
Yeah, exactly. And mycelium is it's definitely it's something that is very much a grouping of individuals, you know, who share this connection to something deeper, and that's something that I like, because I don't really I don't know, I've always been a kind of somebody who doesn't feel comfortable, like, say, joining organization or something per se, you know, like but I think a natural grouping of people is a very great thing, you know, very natural grouping of people who connect on some level. That's the way it should be. I'm not really about like, oh, I need to join some esoteric group or something, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really think this kind of like structure is a good thing, in the sense that there is no hierarchy. There is just like this unifying, how would you say, vision, and there's some kind of like a daimonic thing, like almost like a hive mind in a good way. Not in a zombie or drone like way, but like a hive mind which is connecting all these individuals, like in the slime mold. I don't know what kind of entity it is, but it's usually called like a mushroom or something. But I think in taxonomy, it's not a mushroom, but it is some kind of thing which looks like a mushroom, which can like do some predation, and it can move, and they have been using the slime mold thing to map out the subway system of Tokyo in a like very very quickly, and it's like an anomaly in this world of mushrooms or mycelium. People should check that out. It's very intriguing. But I would say that it is basically like an individual, but then again, it's like a hive mind at the same time. And I find this kind of things extremely fascinating.
Yeah, me too. And like you said, it's also, like you said, it's an underworld force. It's the underlying energy which gives rise to form, you know, and it's a current that spreads across the world that we all connect to. And I think that yeah, it's powerful because it does exist and always has existed, hidden on the hidden levels of reality, you know. So it's very
Yes,
powerful.
definitely.
But I guess we'll go on for 3 hours. I guess we can bring this one to a close. We should try to do our next one sooner. Maybe not wait quite as long as the last time, but you know.
Yeah, I still have lots of undiscussed topics, but we can continue with these topics in the next episode.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you, Konstantin.
Thank you.